say that it's not that we don't value you, that we put you toward the end of the day. Don't get me wrong.
Well, not tomorrow.
But we appreciate you, and it's just that the way the organization of the meeting went together, it made more sense to have the presentations first. But we know you've been working hard. So, John, take it away.
And that's fine, friend, because what we try to do is.
Sorry.
Okay.
They can't hear otherwise.
Well, it's great to be back in Alaska. Now, what we try to do is give you these things in writing, and then we take the report as written unless you have questions. And what we usually do is just briefly go over it. So we find it helpful. Actually, it's a good way to remember what we've done. This time was actually easy since our last meeting was only back in July. But, well, since our last meeting, which was only 58 business days ago.
But who's counting? Calculator or something?
Actually, it's in my report. We've done 58 Arctic daily updates. So what we've done is, as you all know, we did the Ice Diminished Arctic Symposium, where we had several commissioners speak, and we're grateful for that. We support the chair. Let's see, done Arctic Council activities. We have been working on implementing the agreement on enhancing international Arctic science cooperation. I have a few things I can add to that based on what I've written here. It was, as you know, signed in May by all the parties. It has not gone yet into force because only 2 of the parties have informed the depository that they're ready to go, and that is Sweden and the US. Even Denmark, the depository, hasn't indicated that they're ready to do it. But I hear from colleagues that they're close, as is Canada. So that's a matter of time, and then it goes into force 30 days after the last country has indicated that they're ready to move forward. That said, there's still a lot of things that we can do within the US. For example, make some kind of decision tree or terms of reference for how we will do things. For example, are the issues visa related, the consular type of issues that are arisen, which agencies are involved. So I think there's a need to establish an interagency, at least a phone tree of people. Who do we contact when issues arise? Making sure the broader community knows about this agreement, that there is a vehicle to let people know if they have obstacles to access. And to that end, I drafted a piece that will come out in the ARCIS newsletter, which is small distribution, but it's at least something that talks about that will come out at the end of this month. So I will be meeting a State Department in November 2nd with a bunch of people to talk about specific steps that we need to take to implement this, at least be aware of each other and make sure we're all keen on it. What we need to do. Then on December 8th, I will meet with the Danish Foreign Minister representative, who will be coming over, and we will talk about specific steps that we need to do. And perhaps even to encourage the others to get their stuff into the depository so that we can more quickly begin to implement. It would be a shame if it took a whole year to go into force after it was signed. And I did an IARPIC webinar on that too, is trying to get the word out. Okay. Larry mentioned that Larry and I have been members of a visiting expert committee reviewing the College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences. We just did that last week, and we're in the midst of writing that up. It was very helpful. I proposed to the Arctic Circle Assembly a session that Fran will participate in on the second Arctic Science Ministerial. And so Martin Jeffries and Fran and Germans and others will have a session there talking about the ministerial, the first one, and as we transition to the second one, which will be held in October of 2018. We can talk more about that later. Briefed a bunch of people since our July meeting, including a very curious group of analysts from the CIA who came over. And when I said, how do we follow up? They said, we'll contact you. I said, thank you very much. But they anyway, they very curious questions on all things Arctic. It was like Arctic 101 for about 3 hours. Working with the Arctic Domain Awareness Center, they have a marine spill Arctic related incident of national significance workshop coming up in 2 weeks here in Anchorage that we're helping to participate in. The Arctic Science Ministerial. I think the rest we can leave for the booklet. The only other big thing was that I'm seeking your views on us future meetings of us as a body. And in your booklets, on page 7, I reproduced that email. And I don't know if you want to wait for the rest of the staff reports before coming back to that, Fran. Okay, we'll come back to where we want to meet and when. We have a bunch of options in the book on pages 7 and 8 and 9 of my staff report. And then I will leave it at that unless there are any questions.
All right, thank you. I just want to say John and the team did a terrific job for our July meeting and for the marine science work that was done. I think lots of people who attended this summer said that it was the best of the series of what was it, the 7th?
Yeah.
7th one. So I just want to publicly say thank you. I know that takes an incredible amount of time. And trying to get people, just as Cheryl did for this meeting, trying to get all those people lined up and schedules aligned. Anyway, excellent job.
Can I just ask, I was really surprised at how long it took full of calls. Is that typical pastor's interest from?
I think
Yeah. The question was about attendance at the Ice Diminished Arctic meeting.
Yeah, I think attendance was larger this year, although it's usually been a very well attended. The first 1 or 2 were kind of small. That was before I was even involved with it, but I think we started with the 3rd. But because we also went online, it was very interesting. We had a press conference, for example, and it was very few media came to it. Why? They were actually watching it at their desks. And something came out in the New York Times where they had interviewed people who had our symposium and no one actually came to it. They watched it online. So because of the live streaming, it's a significantly larger audience. And I think we'll continue to try to do that in the future. Yeah, right. So I think we didn't really keep good statistics on it, but we did fill, I mean, all the seats were reserved, I should say that much.
Right, thank you, John. Okay, so in the last couple of months, I'm just going to hit on a few high points that I have in the notes here. I attended the CAF meeting, the Council on Arctic Flora and Fauna. That was in Bethel, Alaska, from September 5th to September 7th. Actually, it was the 6th and the 7th in Bethel. There was a meeting here that was just the executive board that I was not able to, I was thinking of sitting in on part of it, but wasn't able to on that day. There were several decision points that were made at this meeting, and there was a review made of the first draft of the new CBMP, or the Circumpolar Biodiversity Monitoring Program Strategic Plan. I don't know if you guys remember, but I was part of the terrestrial experts working group for the CBMP back between 2013 and 2015, and have been kind of tracking them loosely since then. They have just recently stood up both their freshwater and their coastal monitoring group, the experts group, and they're both kind of in differing stages of completion. So it's interesting to watch that process. There was discussion of the implementation of the Arctic invasive alien species, or the ARIAS strategy and action plan. This was a completely new one to me. I was somewhat out of the loop on the CAF's work in the last couple of years, and I was happy to see that this existed. Also, Arctic biodiversity principles, or mainstreaming of biodiversity, and scoping for resilience and management of Arctic wetlands. And then finally, there was a U.S. proposal that Gil Castellanos brought up, presented, and it is on inspiring Arctic voices through youth engagement. And basically, it's advancing the Arctic Youth Ambassadors Program, and that was well received. You'll all note, and I apologize, advisors, I didn't have enough copies to give it to everybody, but the commissioners all have a hard copy of the State of the Arctic Marine Biodiversity Report. That is hot off, it's hot off the presses. It actually was released at this meeting, and basically a very short summary of the outcomes from that. They're talking about food resources being lost for many high Arctic species. Of course, sea ice retreat, range reduction, Arctic species shifting their range northward, increasing numbers of southern species moving into Arctic waters, Arctic marine species and ecosystems feeling pressure from a bunch of new stressors, and the cumulative effects that come with that. And then there is a expected change in energy flow that's happening right now in the high Arctic marine environment. And this kind of goes through, I haven't read the whole thing yet, I haven't had time yet, but it has a very nice layout and hits on these topic areas. You all have a hard copy of that now, and hopefully you'll get some time to take a look at it. There is also a summary report that is available on the CAF website through the Arctic Council. And then finally, to wrap up for the CAF related things, everybody should have gotten one of these. This is kind of a biggie. The next Arctic Biodiversity Conference meeting has been announced. It will be October 9th to 11th in Rovaniemi, Finland. And this was actually a really well-received meeting, the last one they held. And hopefully we will have representatives there. I'll keep you updated as that evolves. Let's see, I talked a little bit about my participation. I've been nominated to the national level NOAA board for the Environmental Information Services Working Group. It's kind of a different set of folks to discuss things with than I'm used to. I'm there as an Arctic representative, but these are mostly forecasters and weather people and weather modelers. So initially I was kind of like, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here, but now it makes sense. There wasn't an Arctic voice in the group, and now there is. And we have been written into the Weather Forecasting Act that was passed in June of 2017. I guess it's one of the few bills that the new president has passed. And somehow this IceWig group got written into it. So all of a sudden I'm on this thing and our responsibilities have changed, and now we actually have to do things. Instead of kind of just providing a report, we have to report out and quantify a whole bunch of different things that come out of NOAA. So it'll be an interesting next couple of years. I'll keep you all posted on how it's going, but I'm learning a lot about things that I don't usually have a lot of direct exposure to, so I appreciate that. And this group meets twice a year in person, and now we'll be having probably quarterly phone calls as well. So we heard about the water and sewer challenge today. I'm not going to go into that much farther, other than last week and the week before was spent reading 900 pages of final reports for the 3 finalists. I don't know if Bill made it clear, but there were 18 initial teams that were part of this challenge, and there were 3 tiers, and the 3rd tier came down to 3, and they were all excellent proposals and very interesting. Again, engineering kind of outside of my comfort zone, but very applicable to so many things Arctic. So it was not an easy read, but it was an interesting read. And we had some wonderful presentations from each of the groups last week. And then we did a lot of discussion back and forth between ourselves and also with the groups on the 2nd day. And it'll be interesting to see how this moves forward into phase 4. This week, we will have the Northern Oil and Gas Forum. I've been on the steering committee for that and have participated in selecting and basically cajoling people into speaking at this meeting. Marie will be chairing a session. I will be chairing a session, and I look forward to, I guess, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of more meetings, more presentations, but it'll be very interesting, I think. And then, let's see. I will mention as well in your handouts, Another steering group that I am part of right now is the National Science Foundation is taking the lead on a steering committee to revise the principles for conduct of research in the Arctic. And I don't know how many folks are familiar. There is already a principles of code of conduct that exists, and it's over 2 decades old, and really is in need of updating, given how things have changed in the last couple decades. So we're working as a group. We have brainstormed things that we think could be improved, and we have also come up with 2 products at this point to solicit information from the public. So our outreach, there's a kind of dry and boring form that is asking researchers for their input on what they think should be in this. And then there is a more user-friendly form for the public that is going to be more of an infographic that will try to make people realize what this is for, why it's important, and get their input on how it can be improved. So I will keep folks updated on how that's going. I think that we probably have at least a 12-month period of input before anything gets fully revised. And I think that is, I'm going to talk to you guys about ACER in a little bit. But other than that, does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? I have a question about the NOAA group that you are on.
Yes.
Is it supposed to evaluate current delivery of information to the weather services around and then give feedback to them on how to do it better? Or?
No, it is a sub-board of NOAA's SAB, the Science Advisory Board. So the Science Advisory Board has 5 subgroups.
And it still
And
exists?
It does, yes. And what's really interesting though is that the Science Advisory Board is not written into law, but now we are, and we're a subgroup of them. So it's kind of a strange, the dynamic is kind of odd.
They're a fact.
Exactly. SAB is a FACA, we are not a FACA group. So as a subgroup, we're not. So, and we, in the past, my understanding is the SAB will often kind of they'll ask us questions or give us tasks to investigate, or we can in turn bring up things to the SAB and say, listen, this is important in this group, to this group of people that deal with X, Y, and Z. We want to make sure it gets considered as a topic of importance.
That's interesting.
Yeah, right.
With regards to the NOAA group, I don't know if this applies, but I just want to let you know, and also the commission know that there's been a change with the updates of weather that we get in our region. And I don't know, I'm sure it's statewide, but we now have to rely on Fairbanks. In the past, we get updates on weather, especially if there's a severe storm coming, notices. Sure, technology has improved, even in rural Alaska, like the area that I live. But about a month and a half ago, the radio, KOTC radio, which is our only radio station, announced that NOAA is no longer going to give the weather. They would give us the weather forecast, and it would be recorded, but it would be played. So now we're having to rely on a local individual that works at the radio station. So that's going to be a real challenge, especially when there's a lot of travel by snow machine in the winter months. And we already heard from one elder. He spoke up at a community meeting, raising these same concerns. And the response I got back is because they were cut back into the staff. I just thought, this is, to me, this is serious, because our region and all of rural Alaska, before going out boating or hunting or traveling to the ranges, the weather forecast and the updates.
Yeah, I mean, it's too bad. Renee Tedesco was here earlier, and she's from the Weather Service. And I can put you in contact with her. Maybe she can provide some more information. And along those lines, just a little while ago, I got an email from Amy Holman over at NOAA asking us to help spread the word that there's a significant storm in the Norton Sound area later this week. So again, it says worse than the current one. But I mean, this is like, it's an interesting thing to get an email like this, because it's kind of like, okay, is this a new, they've got Twitter, they've got Facebook from National Weather Service, and they've got a storm report page. But, you know, maybe there's different strategies now for spreading information. But I agree. I mean, so many folks listen to the radio for that information. And yes, there's an access to the internet, but maybe not for everybody, especially elders, you know.
And people at camps, there's people that stay
Yeah,
at
you
camp
know,
all
it's
year.
It's hard enough to get internet in the town.
That was
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that input. And yeah, I'm happy to provide Renee's information. Any other questions before I go into the working group updates?
I got one more.
Yes.
With regards to the steering committee, you mentioned the outreach. How is that going to be? You said that at this time funding for the outreach part does not appear to be clear.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so. we need to
Yeah,
go
I asked the same question, and I asked that to NSF and was very disappointed to hear that there's no funding, and they expect individual agencies to contribute in kind. So hopefully that results in good outreach. My experience has been, it really depends, and given how people's budgets, especially in places like NOAA right now, it's like, I think that could be a recipe for not great outreach. So I'm going to keep an eye on that, and hopefully, you know, we're going to help however we can. And they've actually asked to use the table we're going to have at the AFN to distribute this. But honestly, I'm kind of like, well, I want to see what the product is first. We haven't really seen the final on that. And obviously, I want the commission to be comfortable with whatever it is we are putting on our table. So hopefully we'll get to the place where everybody's happy with what's produced in terms of a handout.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I had two things I forgot to mention before you go into.
Okay, sure.
My fault. Fran won't be able to make it, but there is going to be an Irb Principals Meeting, the first one since October of last year, on November 16th. I will go representing the commission. Franz Cordova will open the meeting. Dave Bolton will give results from the Arctic Council U.S. chairmanship. There will be a discussion of the Irb principles for the conduct of research in the Arctic, and Cheryl's working on that. Franz Cordova will talk about Irb STEM Education Initiative. I don't know much about that. And then there'll be discussion of the 5-year research plan. But this is the first chance for principals in this administration to meet about the Irb plan.
Yeah, it sounds like it's battery might be going.
The second thing is I received a proposal from Ali Azer, who came to our last meeting. You may remember the woman who sat along the edge of the wall from Marad, who was there. And she's interested in, and she's done a lot of work with the Committee on Marine Transportation Systems on shipping in the Arctic. She did this as part of the Arctic Executive Steering Committee, and she worked with Helen Brawl on a number of things. And she's very interested in improving regional and global assumptions to better understand and project future Arctic vessel activity. This is something that, of course, Zach has some interest in. So she's interested in refining those things. She's been working with Lawson on the possibilities, and she's like to know if the commission has any interest in co-sponsoring this. She and Lawson and perhaps others would be the subject matter experts in this, but given some of the commission's interest, she wants to know that. So I'd be happy to float that proposal that she sent to the commissioners to consider, but I wanted to give you a heads up on that. I think our obligation would be some travel support, but it would be hosted at MARA, which is the Department of Transportation.
More on that.
Yeah, I will forward.
Okay, I know this is post-lunch. I hear people yawning, but hopefully this won't be East Coast people are yawning. That's okay then. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick presentation on our 3 working groups. And for those of you who haven't heard this before, the commission started out in 2009. Our first working group we pulled together was the Alaska Rural Water and Sanitation Working Group. And this was in response to some research that came out not too long before that, really clearly tying human health with the provision of adequate amounts of clean water and sanitation in villages. And what we were initially trying to do is get together a group of people across federal, state, tribal, NGO, and academic lines to come together and talk about things that meet together in a way that they maybe don't normally meet together, and talk about things that they have in common. And in this case, it was improving health outcomes for people in rural Alaska with respect to water and sanitation. So that gives you a little bit of information on our history on our first group. And since then, starting in 2015, we created 2 other groups, similar principle, but one focused on renewable energy and energy efficiency in rural Alaska, and a third focused on Arctic mental health in the Arctic. So I'm going to start first with our oldest group, which is crazy. It's 8 years old now. The Arctic, or the R is a WIG. It's kind of a bad acronym. We weren't thinking when we made this working group, it was before all the snappy acronyms had been created. So we would have used the acronym generator if it had been around back then. But anyways, it's a bad acronym. But again, our mission is to maximize health benefits of in-home running water and sanitation services in rural Alaska. You saw some of that earlier today. Like I mentioned earlier, both Don Antrobus and Bill Griffith are on our group, but we also have folks from ANTHC, USDA, RD, CDC, YKHC, the Yukon Kuskokwim Health Corporation, and EPA, and we're hoping to wrangle Aaron back onto our group as an academic member from UAA. He was on and then stepped off during the water and sewer challenge, but it'd be great to have him back. We have this nice little diagram that I know you have all seen before. Again, health is the center of everything, but we promote research and development in terms of innovative approaches to water. And the number one thing that has come out of this has been the water and sewer challenge, which is kind of a direct wellspring out of this group, and with ADEC at the helm. Improve village level capacity on a whole bunch of different things, especially for operations and maintenance of these systems. Develop innovative strategies for capital, the allocation of capital funds. So what we don't say there is we are very interested, even though it's not a very popular word right now, but in trying to figure out how subsidization might work into water and sanitation and improving life for folks in villages. There are other subsidized approaches for other types of utilities in Alaska, and this, through community level engagement, we're trying to work with folks to figure out other ways to try to make water and sewer, running water in people's homes more achievable. And then finally, this is the newest box or objective that we've come up with in supporting research on the connection between climate, water, and human or environmental health. So it's kind of bringing that together, that one health concept. I'm going to talk a little bit at the very end about upcoming things, so we'll hit back on the water and sanitation, what we have coming up soon. But because you guys heard about the water and sewer challenge today, I'm not going to go into that any further here. The Arctic Renewable Energy Working Group, our mission, again, to benefit Arctic communities by identifying and addressing critical renewable energy and energy efficiency research needs. And we have a big group, not the biggest, but a pretty big group here. Is this the biggest?
This is the biggest.
This is the biggest, 21 members?
Yeah.
We've got a whole lot of people that are on these calls, and trying to get folks working together on this stuff has been actually, interestingly, overwhelmingly, folks were very, very interested in this. And that is what we have spent the majority of our time. The biggest concern we hear when we go out to villages is the cost of fuel for heat. And people are concerned that they're not going to be able to heat their homes. So basically, we want to improve energy efficiency and explore the integration of renewable energy into heating approaches, in heating and electrical approaches. Also, figuring out how to get investors more comfortable, especially private investors, in investing in renewable energy and energy efficiency in villages. Promoting village level project financing, trying to figure out how to get folks into credit worthy zones. And again, this kind of links in with this risk investment risk. Promoting better understandings of the indirect costs and benefits of renewable energy. This is actually kind of a neat one. Gwitchin International has just come out with a report on exactly this. Did they get a copy of this? They didn't.
No, they did not.
Okay, I'd probably send this to folks if they're interested by email. Basically looking at the costs and benefits of diesel and how to try to put some cost on the amount of carbon you produce when you continue to use diesel powered generators, the benefit of having clean air versus not clean air in your local environment, and things along those lines. Our group has been kind of wrestling with how to get this off the ground, so we were kind of happy to see that Gwich'in International had done this, and we hope to talk about their report as a group and figure out how we can build off of it, because they've got a great start going. And then finally, increasing village capacity to undertake renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. So that's the capacity issue that I'll talk a little bit about later as well. So we've got a couple of subgroups, indirect impact subgroups. These are our members, and like I said, we haven't got too far with this yet. Project financing, did you want to talk real quickly about?
I think it's in the upcoming events. So
okay, we'll have that in upcoming events. This has kind of been our big, you guys have, there's copies of the first workshop report, which is right here. We have provided you with a draft of our second workshop report. And again, this is residential heating and remote arcing villages. And the first one was research needs. And the second one that is in draft form is how to implement these research needs. So how do we get there? And this was a December, almost a year ago, and 9 months ago, we had a workshop, and we came up with a bunch of, pretty much a roadmap of how to get to where we need to be in terms of the research needs that we came up with in the first workshop. There is a plan for a third workshop eventually. Once we get some of these needs implemented, we want to go back and look and see how effective we are with the work that we've done or encouraged. The Arctic Mental Health Working Group, again, and this is kind of a long mission, but strengthen systems of care to prevent suicide and improve mental health in the circumpolar north via the promotion of indigenous knowledge, research, and evidence-based early intervention and primary prevention efforts. So I want to underline, and we'll talk about this in the next slide. Again, large group from a large variety of different places. You'll see that Lisa Wexler from the Anchor Group, the hub that we heard from Stacy. Stacy Rasmus was on this, but now Lisa has been sitting in. We have just folks from a bunch of different groups in Alaska, and we've been working with a bunch of subgroups. Let's see, that's where our initial focus. We're very interested on this early intervention approach for children and youth, trying to get the problem addressed, especially, we heard earlier today quite a bit about the ACEs scoring, and for children that are at risk, that have high ACE scores, trying to figure out how to best intervene early to try to keep them out of kind of a cycle of bad things as it relates to suicide and suicidality. Remarkably, there's not a lot of research out there, even from the lower 48. So it's we had expected to have a lot more to build off of, and just haven't really. And so this remains kind of our main goal, but we've been struggling on kind of how to fully address it, but we're working on it. Our objectives in general, data analysis to improve our understanding of the epidemiology of mental and behavioral health issues in Alaskan communities. So Alaska specific is really important here. That's the first. Workforce capacity, you all got a handout. It's our newest one-pager, literally finished last week or finalized last week. This handout I'm going to have Carrie just give a brief synopsis of in just a moment. But this has been it's been underway. We met as a group several times, and we have produced this probably over the last 10 to 12 months. And strengthening mental health protective factors of children and youth with a focus on community-based efforts. That really refers a lot to the work that Lisa Wexler does in villages. And then also, this is our newest objective, and again, it's bringing the climate change issue in, understanding the impacts of climate change on mental health. We had a really excellent presentation by folks at
Eco America.
Eco America, and It was work that they did in northeastern Canada, and on the relationship between mental health and climate change. And it was fascinating and a really excellent presentation, and it is open access. So if folks are interested in the link, we can send that around as well. So these are the subgroups: data integration, workforce capacity. I think those will go without explanation. We'll be talking about a couple of the things that they're doing just in a couple slides. Protective factors subgroup. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can.
So the protective factors subgroup, we've been doing a lot of brainstorming, a lot of trying to figure out how, as a working group, we can make an impact. A lot of the things that we've been talking about, Anchor, that Stacy presented to you earlier, kind of address. One of the things that I think is towards the end of their goals is how do you translate what we know about mental health in young children to the people that are actually on the ground and can implement it and use it. So that's one area where we may be able to do something more if Anchor doesn't get there. But a lot of the things that we've been talking about, and Charlie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Anchor really does kind of cover a lot of the things we've been talking about in terms of why are some villages more healthy than others, what are the differences. So a lot of the things that we've been talking about, Anchor is starting to do. And so as a group, as a subgroup, we need to now come back together and say, okay, it looks like Anchor's covering these things. Where should we go next with that particular subgroup?
Good. Thank you.
And then our climate, we have a subgroup that is about to be formed that's going to focus in on the climate change aspects. That has not been formed yet. It's a kind of a to be determined. We know who some of the members will be, but not everybody, and that's an upcoming effort. So specifically, okay, you can go back up again. And I want to mention as well that Carrie is the coordinator for both the mental health group and the renewable energy group, and I'm thrilled with the way everything's been organized and brought together, and I want to give you a pat on the back and a shout out for doing a great job. Carrie is going to talk about, this is our one-pager. You should have a copy of it at your desk.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a copy of it.
So this has
Thank
been
you.
an effort over the last year or so. The thinking being that in order to provide support and intervention and prevention to young children and youth is that you need a well-established workforce of the people who can do those sorts of things. And in remote communities, we just don't have that. Even in Alaska in general, the ratio of mental health care providers to population is much lower than the ratio of mental health care providers to populations in other throughout the nation. And so not only does Alaska tend to have a bigger need, we also have a lower ratio of people who can support that need and provide services in the mental health care field. And so the group, we talked a lot about this research, not only the need, which is starting to be well established through various Alaska behavioral health system assessment report kind of captured what the need was. But we also looked at how the provider numbers that we have compared to the national levels, and then we came up with a series of 4 recommendations in terms of what the group thought were areas of needed research. And so I'll just read those to you really quickly. Established Alaska-specific estimates for the numbers and types of mental health care providers needed. So there's been a couple of studies at the national level saying communities need this many psychiatrists or this many behavioral health aides or things like that. But Alaska, as we all know, is very unique, has a very unique geography and population. And so to do a study similar to the national one, but specifically focused on Alaska, was one of the research recommendations the group came up with. The second one was understanding and predicting how the redesign of Alaska's Medicaid program and the potential integration of mental health care and primary health care would impact the need for mental health care providers in Alaska. Would it lessen the need if we started integrating mental health care into primary health care needs? So that's the second one. The third one was create research-informed alternative approaches to providing mental health care in remote areas. We know in Northern Canada that telemedicine systems and other e-health applications have had good success in the mental health field. And so how to get the mental health providers who maybe aren't in the communities, what are the things that need to be done to create alternative approaches to mental health care in remote areas?
And then the final one was to investigate job satisfaction and retention to better understand how to grow and strengthen the mental health workforce. And here, one of the thoughts was there are other grow your own type programs already in place, and can we build off of those in some way? And that was the fourth research recommendation that the group came up with.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I've got a couple more slides left, and this has to do with upcoming activities. I just want to let folks know that what we have planned. I'm sure that this will expand, but we will be attending the AFN October 19th to the 21st, and we're going to have a table that will be shared with the Alaska Oceans Observing System, and we will be giving out our products. We will be doing a poll, and we hope to get input from you guys on the questions we have. And when we're in session after 4, we'll go through what we've come up with thus far in terms of questions. Again, we're trying to keep it simple, 10 questions, so people don't get burnt out and don't want to stand around too long and not answer our questions. So we're hoping to roll that out at AFN. Thank you, Marie, for that idea, because I think that will be really, it will be very interesting information, and it will help inform our next goals report. I am working on a Fulbright application for the Arctic Fulbright program that's going to be based around village level capacity, and I can provide more details on that if folks are interested. I'll also be attending the BIA Providers Conference later in November, and can report back on that at the next meeting. For our water and sanitation group, we've got a few different things coming up soon. The Alaska Tribal Conference on Environmental Management will be coming up in November. And as part of that, we will most likely be working as a working group to get some input on a planned alpha post-summit workshop. So I'm going to jump down to that. I'm sorry to be jumping around, but we are interested in health economics and the indirect costs of not having water. And we know the health impacts. That's been well documented. We have information on clinic visits and information on especially respiratory and skin diseases that are related to lack of provision to adequate amounts of water. However, there is a cascade of effects like missed work, missed school, perhaps lower graduation rates, increased intake of things like soda and sugary drinks when you don't feel water secure. We are interested in getting community input on and also researcher input on what they think these effects might be, and trying to accumulate that information so that it can kind of form the basis of a study that we hope will be done, maybe perhaps through ICER or another appropriate group, not us, but we'd like to kind of have the information on hand to try to encourage that kind of research. We are also going to have a session at Alpha in January. This is 2018, January 16th to 19th. There'll be a session again to talk about our working group's progress, as well as the Healthy Alaskan 2020 objectives and where we're at with that. I talked about our post-summit workshop, and then we'll also be working on communications plan with USDA Rural Development. They have kind of offered up their communications personnel that have a lot of experience in doing outreach to help us do both public and legislative outreach for water and sanitation related issues. So those are kind of things in the hopper for our water and sanitation working group. In terms of our renewable energy working group, we'll be completing and distributing the second residential heating and remote Arctic villages workshop report. We will be having a session either sponsored or co-sponsored at the Rural Energy Conference in April this coming spring, and it will be related to community project financing. And then finally, Carrie has been attending waste to energy meetings. These are quarterly webinars that are hosted by USDA RD. And AMWIG, our mental health group, again, we have this new publication, and we'll be distributing this one-pager on mental health care workforce shortage. We will be having a meeting in our offices on October 16th that will be led by DHSS, James Galanos, and this will be focused on Alaska suicide surveillance model and a development for this model itself.
We'll also be hosting a breakout session at the Alaska Native Health Research Conference. This is at ANTHC on October 18th. This session will be USARC Mental Health Working Group overview, and we will be getting research priority input from community members and research experts that will be attending this meeting. And then finally, again, at Alpha, we'll be also having a mental health session. This session will be titled Mental and Behavioral Health Workforce Capacity Needs, and that is in development right now. I think that's my last slide, and I'm happy to take questions, and if I can, I'll punt them to Carrie to answer. Does anyone have any questions about our working groups or any suggestions? Everyone's getting tired. It's the end of the day. Okay, great.
My only suggestion with regard to the mental health and suicide work, and I know you're doing this anyway, but I just think it needs to be said, your effort began before UAF was successful in getting the NIMH grant.
Yep.
And so now that they have received this funding and are sort of scoping out the way they're going to go forward, I guess it's just really important, on the one hand, for them to know what you all have done over the last year or so they don't try to replicate it. But secondly, so that our working group that we put a lot of time and energy into dials appropriately to complement it as opposed to you guys both doing basically the same thing. And I know that goes without saying, but
Yep.
I said it anyway.
Yeah, no, and it's one of the reasons why, so that climate change and mental health, that had been it had been brought up as a priority, but we thought we had enough on our plate. We put it on the back burner, and when the Anchor program came, it looks like it's got some redundancy with a couple of our priorities. We thought, okay, maybe we lay off those and we bring this back. And that's one of the reasons why climate and health and mental health is back on our list, on the priorities and the objectives. So we're working on it, and we are in close contact with Stacy. We'll most certainly be at the April meeting, and